the smile of control, how positivity became a prison disguised as freedom. We live in an age addicted to optimism. Turn on your phone, scroll your feed, walk into any self-help aisle, and you'll be bombarded with messages like, manifest your dream life, good vibes only, hustle harder and believe in yourself. It feels empowering, motivating, hopeful. But what if I told you this relentless optimism is not liberating you, it's enslaving you? What if the very thing we've praised as the path to freedom has quietly become the most sophisticated form of control? That's the warning Byung Chul, one of the most brilliant and quietly dangerous philosophers of our time, wants us to hear. And we're not just going to hear it. We're going to feel it. Because once you understand what he's really saying, you'll never look at positivity the same way again.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Let's start here. Han argues that the world we live in is no longer ruled by external oppression, but by internal pressure. We are not being forced to work harder, longer, and faster. We are motivated to. We are inspired to. We are excited to. And that's precisely the trap. In the past, we could clearly identify the enemy. The boss, the system, the authority figure. But now, the enemy is inside us. It's our own voice whispering, you didn't do enough today. You should be further ahead. You need to optimize your morning routine. You need to be positive, focused, grateful, productive. It sounds like self-improvement. It looks like ambition, but it's actually a new form of violence. A self-inflicted violence. And the most dangerous part? We celebrate it. Byung Chul calls this the Achievement Society, a world where we no longer say, you must, but rather you can. It sounds like freedom. But what if it's just a smarter cage? Because if you can, then why haven't you? If you can be anything, what's wrong with you if you're still nothing? If you can be happy, then your sadness must be your own fault. You see the shift? We've moved from external blame to internal shame, from oppression to depression. And in Han's view, that's exactly how power works in the 21st century. It hides behind the language of empowerment. It doesn't whip you. It motivates you. It doesn't punish you. It inspires you. And it doesn't silence you. It tells you, speak your truth, while selling you 1,000 ways to package it into content. Let's pause for a moment and ask something uncomfortable. Are we really free when the pressure to be positive never stops? When even rest must be productive? When even sadness must be reframed as a lesson? When even failure must be branded as fuel? That's not freedom. That's performance. And what Han warns us is this. Our obsession with positivity is not helping us escape the system, it's helping the system escape responsibility. Because if you're always the problem, then the world never has to change. If you just need the right mindset, the right attitude, the right morning routine, then injustice, inequality, and exploitation can continue unchanged, wrapped in the soothing glow of motivational quotes. And here's where it gets even darker. The more we internalize this optimism, the more exhausted we become. But we don't recognize it as burnout. We call it a lack of discipline, a lack of purpose. We think we just need to try harder. So we double down, we biohack, we productivity stack. We gratitude journal ourselves into numbness. And the machine keeps running, because we become the engine, the slave and the master, the prisoner and the guard, all while smiling and saying, I'm just working on myself. So what's the alternative? Han doesn't offer a simple answer. He's not a guru. He doesn't hand out 5-step plans. What he offers is a mirror. A terrifyingly honest mirror. One that asks, what if your constant positivity is a form of denial? What if your obsession with becoming better is a refusal to face what already is? What if your optimism is not hope but fear wearing a smile? These aren't easy questions, but they're the right ones. Because sometimes the most revolutionary act isn't to dream bigger but to stop, to feel, to rest, to say no, not because you're lazy, but because you're done performing. Let's go even deeper. Han draws from Heidegger, Nietzsche, Foucault, philosophers who understood that truth is rarely what it seems. That what we call normal is often just what we've been conditioned to accept. And right now we've been conditioned to view life as a project or brand, an optimization problem. But what if life is not something to be improved but something to be lived? What if the goal isn't to be high vibe all the time but to be whole? To be real, even when that means being messy, uncertain, or broken. This is the part where the video should shake you. Not with drama, but with depth. Because what we're talking about here isn't just a critique of toxic positivity, it's a question of existence. What kind of life are we building when authenticity has been replaced by performance? When suffering has been reframed as failure? When silence is filled with affirmations and stillness is filled with hustle? Byung Chul Han's warning is not about abandoning hope. It's about examining the kind of hope we've been sold, the kind that doesn't liberate but pacifies, the kind that doesn't challenge the system but keeps it running smoother, the kind that doesn't make you more human but makes you more efficient. And maybe, just maybe, the way out isn't more positivity but more truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. So here's where we end this first part, not with a conclusion, but with a challenge. Can you sit in the discomfort of being without immediately trying to fix, improve, or reframe it? Can you let go of the need to always be moving forward and instead ask, what am I running from? Because until we face that question, we can't be free. We'll keep smiling. Keep grinding. Keep branding our lives into bite-sized chunks of inspiration. And we'll never notice the chains because they're made of gold. The productivity paradox, how self-optimization became the new form of slavery. You wake up, drink your water, check your phone, squeeze in a 10-minute meditation, hit the gym, track your macros, journal your gratitude, and start your deep work. You're optimizing, you're hacking, you're winning. But stop for a second, who are you doing this for? And more importantly, what are you becoming in the process? Byung Chul Han asks us to look at the life we think we're improving and ask, is it even yours anymore? Because here's the shadow no one wants to look at. What we call self-improvement may actually be self-destruction disguised as progress. We've replaced the whip of the factory with the push notification, the foreman with the fitness tracker, the assembly line with the algorithm. And we call it freedom. We call it empowerment. But what if it's just a smarter form of slavery, one where we carry the chains voluntarily, smiling all the while? In Han's view, our culture has undergone a subtle but total transformation. We've moved from a disciplinary society where power was external, visible, and coercive to an achievement society where power is internal, invisible, and seductive. We no longer say, "You must obey." Now we whisper to ourselves, "You must become." Become what? More. Always more. More productive. More optimized. More successful. More mindful. More positive. More until we collapse under the weight of our own performance. And when we do collapse, we don't blame the system. We blame ourselves. We think we're just not trying hard enough, not meditating long enough, not journaling consistently, not manifesting properly. We treat burnout as a personal failure instead of what it really is, a symptom of a sick culture pretending to be healthy. Here's the paradox: the more you try to optimize your life, the less of it you're actually living. Because optimization is rooted in the idea that now is not enough, that you are not enough, that life must be constantly tweaked, edited, and improved. But when does it end? When do you finally arrive? The truth is, you don't. That's the trap. Because the self that is always optimizing is a self that never feels complete. It's a loop, a treadmill, a system that feeds on your discontent and sells you the illusion of becoming. Let's pause here and ask something radical. What would happen if you stopped trying to be better? Not worse, not apathetic, just enough. Could you even imagine it? Or have you been so programmed to chase future versions of yourself that you've forgotten how to be the present one? Han writes about the violence of positivity, the way it eliminates negativity, not by resolving it, but by suppressing it. In other words, we don't deal with pain. We brand over it. We don't sit with insecurity. We reframe it. We don't question the system. We optimize within it. And in doing so, we become complicit in our own exploitation. Because a person who is constantly improving themselves is a person who will never rebel. Why would you protest when you believe your suffering is your own fault? This is where the productivity paradox begins to reveal its full shape. You think you're improving your life, but your life has become a project, and a series of metrics. You're not living, you're producing. And the worst part, you're producing yourself. You are the product now. Your value is determined by your output, how many books you read, how many tasks you complete, how many followers you gain. You don't have a life. You have a dashboard. And the more you produce, the more you believe you exist. It's existential capitalism. I produce, therefore I am. But what if you stopped producing? Who would you be then? Could you even tolerate the silence? Let's go deeper. Han says that freedom has been rebranded. It no longer means liberation from oppression. It means the freedom to perform, to compete, to create value. In other words, we're not free from the system. We're free to serve it more efficiently. And we call that empowerment. But there's a reason you're tired. A reason you feel like you're always behind, even when you're ahead. A reason you feel like rest is guilt and stillness is laziness. It's because you're caught in a game that has no end and no exit. Unless you stop playing. Here's a question that might change everything. What if the real work isn't to become more, but to unlearn the belief that you're not already enough? What if your obsessive need to optimize is just a sophisticated distraction from facing the deeper truth that worth isn't earned by effort, but remembered through stillness? Stillness. That's the word Han keeps circling. Not as a tactic, but as resistance. In a world that demands constant motion, stillness is subversive. In a culture that monetizes attention, silence is sacred. In a system that reduces you to output, rest is a revolution. So how do we reclaim our humanity? How do we unplug from this invisible matrix of self-performance? The answer isn't in a productivity hack. It's in a philosophical shift, a reorientation from doing to being, from optimizing to observing, from chasing to choosing. You begin by questioning the very assumptions that drive your life. Who told you that more is always better? Who benefits from your exhaustion? What parts of yourself have you silenced in the name of improvement? These are not easy questions, but they are necessary. Because until you ask them, you will keep mistaking your programming for personality. You'll keep mistaking performance for purpose. You'll keep mistaking burnout for ambition. Byung Chul Han's warning is not that you're doing too little. It's that you're doing too much that isn't truly you. That your life has become a museum of metrics, curated for visibility, but hollow at the core. And if you want to reclaim it, you have to step back. Not forward, not up, back. Into silence, into stillness, into the terrifying and beautiful space of simply being. So here's where we end this part with a quiet dare. Can you go one full day without optimizing anything? Without tracking, tweaking, improving, or branding? Can you just live not as a project, but as a person? And if that feels scary, good. That means you're waking up. The liberation of limits, how saying no becomes the highest form of freedom. What if the most powerful word you could say in this world isn't yes? What if it's no? No to the constant pressure to become someone else. No to the performance of positivity. No to the illusion that your worth is measured by your output. No to the culture that tells you rest is weakness and limits are failure. In a world that demands endless resilience, infinite growth, and relentless self-optimization, saying no is not retreat, it's resistance. It's the beginning of true freedom. And this is where Byung Chul Han leads us, not with a raised fist, but with a quiet, devastating insight. The only way out of an achievement society is to reclaim your limits. Limits are not your enemy, but in our culture, they've been framed as such. We're told to break through them, transcend them, hack them. But what if limits are not boundaries to be overcome, but truths to be honored? What if the refusal to acknowledge your limits is precisely what keeps you enslaved? Because a person who doesn't recognize their limits will never stop pushing. And a person who never stops pushing will eventually break, not because they're weak, but because they're human. Han's brilliance lies in how he connects this to the cultural obsession with positivity. Optimism tells us that anything is possible, that we can always do more, be more, achieve more if only we believe. But what if that kind of thinking is not hopeful, but violent? What if it erases the sacred reality of being finite, not infinite, not boundless, not scalable, but real? You are not a brand. You are not a product. You are not a growth curve. You are a person. And people have limits. Bodies have limits. Minds have limits. Time has limits. And to live well is not to deny those limits, but to love them. Let's step into that truth. When was the last time you said no to something not out of fear or laziness, but out of love? Love for your time. Love for your energy. Love for your peace. We've been trained to think that saying yes to everything is a sign of strength. But it's not. It's often a sign of fear. Fear of missing out. Fear of not being enough. Fear of being forgotten. But real strength looks like discernment. Real power looks like boundaries. Real freedom looks like knowing what is yours and what is not. Think about how many things you say yes to out of guilt, obligation, or image. How many opportunities you chase that don't align with your truth. How much you consume content, advice, improvement tips just to keep up with an invisible standard of better. What if you stopped? What if you said, "This is enough"? Not because you've given up, but because you've woken up. This is what Han means when he talks about the exhaustion of the self. Not just physical exhaustion, but existential. We're tired not because we're weak, but because we're caught in an endless cycle of becoming, of self-production, of performance. And the only way out is not through more effort, but through less. And through subtraction, through stillness, or through limits. We must rediscover the art of doing nothing, not as laziness, but as reclamation. In ancient cultures, rest was sacred. Silence was sacred. Slowness was sacred. But today we treat them as obstacles. We get bored in seconds. We fill every pause, we speed up every process. But what if the pause is the process? What if rest is not what you do when you're weak, but what you do when you're wise? Let me ask you something confronting. Do you know how to stop? Not quit, not fail, but stop. To sit, to breathe, to be. Can you spend an afternoon without checking your phone, without learning something new, without working on yourself? Can you sit in a room and not escape into productivity, distraction, or fake positivity? If not, why? What are you afraid you'll discover in that silence? Because here's the truth. Silence reveals what noise hides. And until you face that silence, you're not really free. You're just busy. Han's philosophy doesn't end in despair. It ends in a quiet kind of revolution, a return to the self. Not the optimized self, but the authentic one. The one that doesn't need to be sold. The one that doesn't need to be improved. The one that exists before branding, before metrics, before performance. And here's the final twist. This isn't about pessimism. It's about honesty. Han isn't asking you to give up. He's asking you to wake up. To see that true hope is not found in the denial of pain, but in the integration of it. That real joy isn't manic positivity, it's presence. That the good life isn't the one that always feels good, it's the one that feels real. So maybe optimism is your greatest enemy, not because it's bad, but because it's incomplete, because it tells only half the story. And the other half, the part we've ignored, is aching to be heard. The part that says you don't have to keep going. You're allowed to stop. The part that says you don't have to smile right now. You're allowed to feel. The part that says you don't have to become someone else. You're already enough. That's the revolution. Not louder, not faster, not brighter, but truer. And it begins the moment you say no, not to life, but to the lie that you must always be more to be worthy. Byung Chul Han's warning is not a prophecy of doom. It's an invitation to reclaim the sacred, to honor your limits, to stop running, and to finally come home not to your future self, but to the person you already are. So here's the final question. What would your life look like if you stopped trying to be extraordinary and simply lived as if ordinary was already enough? Because maybe it is. And maybe that's the most radical truth of all.